Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's business building session. I'm Mike O'Neill with Bench Builders, and I'll be your host for today's Q&A session. Joining us today as expert panelist is Kevin Monroe of X Factor Consulting. Welcome, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Mike. I'm excited and delighted to be here joining you, Rhonda, and everyone else that's joining either live or watching later recorded.
We're glad you're with us. And also, my colleague Rhonda Beard is again with us. She'll be answering your questions as well. Good morning, Rhonda.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Kevin. Thanks for joining, everybody.
We launched these Q&A sessions to bring together experts like Kevin to help us as business owners, leaders, and HR professionals kind of stay on top of what the important issues are in order for you to build your businesses. I want to just kind of remind those who've not been with us in the past, the format we follow will be mixed up a little bit this go around, but let me just remind you that what's going to happen is anybody who's registered is going to be getting a follow-up email, and in that email will be not only a recording of our time together, it also will include the slide deck that we're using, and we typically will include some additional resource materials. So be looking for that email. Probably you'll get that within 24 to 48 hours after we wrap up today. I want to, if it's all right with you, I want to kind of give you a sense of what we're going to be doing today and what we're going to focus on. The topic that we've asked Kevin to speak on is how do you create and facilitate online meetings that excite, ignite, and engage participants? And I've invited Kevin to join us for a variety of reasons. Kevin wears many hats, including being a long-term podcaster. And I highly recommend that you subscribe to his Higher Purpose podcast. It's excellent. Kevin also hosts a weekly Google Hangout that typically has 50 plus folks, many that do the same kind of work that we do at Bench Builders. They do organizational consulting, executive coaching, and strategic planning. And he is able, week in and week out, to facilitate an 1-hour online meeting that, in fact, excites, ignites, and engaging these folks. And as a result, I could think of no better person to invite us to a webinar to kind of help us learn tricks that he has built over the time that he's been doing this, and it's been quite some time. So Kevin, we're glad you are with us. I am currently sharing my screen. I want to turn the screen over to you. Welcome. It's good to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Rhonda. I'm excited to be here and to have this conversation. And I want to underscore that word. I want to have a conversation with you today. And I want to do things that might be a little different for how you have done things here. So let me start by this. I use this tool called Mentimeter. You can go to menti.com, enter the code 808462. That's menti.com. You can do this from your phone, your laptop, tablet, desktop, any digital device. I've not had anyone do this yet, but I think if you have a digital abacus, what the things that we used to do to count, you know, back in the old days?
Well, I don't use an abacus, but but there's a digital one. Let's go get one.
Yeah, if you have a digital abacus, you can even try it on that. How are you feeling about today's meeting? Go to menti.com, menti.com, use the code 808462, and then we just have the opportunity to get, you can post questions like this. And so some of our conversation today, I'm just going to mix back and forth. I'm going to host a conversation with you all. Then I'm going to talk about why I do some of the things I do using the tools and the technology the way I do, integrating these. So this is interesting. Most of you are curious. I'm glad that there's nobody that's, you know, like that Zoom fatigue guy over there on the far column. Not another meeting. Just put me out of it now. And some of you are excited. So I'm excited to be here. Let me do something else. And this is something I know Kristen will be familiar with. This is a way I start most every meeting, whether it's live in person, back when we used to do live in-person meetings, or whether it is the Hangouts that I host every Friday, that you too can join us tomorrow at noon Eastern time. What are you freshly grateful for? So what is something you're grateful for now? What are you freshly grateful for now? You can just type in, this creates a word cloud that you'll see in just a moment. And I'm wondering, what is something that you're grateful for now? Technology. Mike, what are you grateful for now? You can just speak up. What's something you're grateful for?
I'm grateful that everything that we're supposed to work this morning is working. So I am thankful for not only technology, but technology that works.
Yes, yes. I'm always grateful for technology that works. Rhonda, what about you?
I would say I'm thankful for my good health right now, especially in today's environment, always, but especially in today's environment. Thankful that me and all of my family are staying healthy.
Beautiful. Yeah. You know, I have done these. I started using Mentimeter 4 years ago. I see someone's just typed in the chat, better relationships. Absolutely. I started using Mentimeter 4 years ago when I was doing a project for a client in Norway that said, we have this tool if you'd like to use it. I've been using it ever since. If you know how word clouds work, like family is a bigger word there, that means more than one person has responded with family. So you get to see this real time. Coffee's always a good one to start the day. So let me just ask a moment. I'll leave this up here for a moment. Why might you want to start your meetings with a gratitude moment? Anything come to mind, Mike or Rhonda? And folks, I want to assure you, none of this is scripted. They do not have this question in advance. So if they pause a moment, it's because they're thinking about this for the first time. But why might you, and you watching, why might you want to start? Greg Love, yeah, icebreaker. It is an icebreaker, and I will say more about that in a moment. But Rhonda, Mike, anything you want to respond?
I think it gets the meeting off on a positive note. So I think it puts people in a good frame of mind and also keeps people obviously engaged in what's going on with the speaker.
I love that answer, Rhonda. And we could do a whole session on gratitude. It was about a year ago this time, I started hosting gratitude challenges through the podcast that I host. We began hosting gratitude challenges. And then I started having clients integrate gratitude in their meetings. Why? And Kinsey just put it in the chat. It gets everyone thinking in a positive mindset. Gratitude focuses our energy in the right direction. Gratitude gets you thinking about what's right in our team, in our company, in our business. And what's on so many people's minds so often when they enter a meeting? They may be focusing on what's wrong. They may be focusing on the problem. Mike, like what would we have been focusing on if Zoom had not worked correctly? If Mentimeter had not displayed? We'd be sitting here frustrated with the technology trying to figure that out. So starting with something positive moves the meeting in a different direction. So let me make a couple of other points here. Let's see, did I go? Yeah. People, and I don't know where first time I read this, but I read this some months ago. People do not actually feel that they are part of a meeting until they've had an opportunity or a chance to contribute to the meeting. Now think about that for a moment, because I'll ask you this a little later. And we'll talk about some of the meetings you're in, some of the meetings you have. But first, I want to launch a poll here, use something else, a function of Zoom. So I'm using two different technologies here. One is Mentimeter that we're just sharing via share screen. But now I'm asking a poll. How many hours do you spend each week online in meetings? And the choices are less than 5, 5 to 10, 11 to 20, or greater than 20. And right now, I know a lot of people, and I'm one of those people. I'm on Zoom more than 20 hours a week. More than 20 hours a week. And I will tell you, I've not experienced Zoom fatigue yet. Now, there are some times my eyes get tired of looking at a screen. But I wrote an article last month. You may have heard about Zoom fatigue. I asked the question, what if you are the reason for Zoom fatigue? What if the way you're hosting meetings is why meetings are bad and why your people are experiencing Zoom fatigue? So are you able to see the results of the poll yet? I see them. I don't want to quite end it yet, but
I'm not seeing it, Kevin.
okay.
Kevin, I do see it, so you might have to read it back to the folks.
Yeah, I'll read it back, and then I'll give another moment and see if anybody else wants to weigh in. Right now, the answers are the most popular answer, with 50% of you responding, are in the 5 to 10 hours a week on online meetings. And then the second most popular answer is less than 5. And then 13% are in the 11 to 20 hours a week of Zoom meetings. No one here is over 20. Christy says she would also be in that less than 5 category. So a lot of you are spending a good amount of time on meetings. So the other part that I want to ask, people don't feel that that they are part of a meeting until they've had a chance to contribute. Why might you think that is the case? Why don't people feel that they are part of the meeting? I asked Mike this yesterday. Mike and I were talking, and I said, what's on your mind when you go to a meeting?
And the first thing I typically am doing is I'm saying, oh gosh, yet another meeting. You made a comment a moment ago, and I'd like just to piggyback on it just for a second. Kevin, one reason we were interested in inviting you to this is we are trying to figure out ways to more actively engage the people who've decided to give us an hour of their time. One of the drawbacks with a webinar format is that you're hearing, you're seeing, but unless you're able to open it up like in a meeting where everybody can contribute and we can hear and see them, it's a little bit constraining with the chat box or the Q&A box. We recognize that, but from a platform standpoint, this seems to be the best that we can do, but we're trying to learn from Kevin, how can we make this even more engaging? So I'm worried if I'm going into a meeting, if I'm not running the meeting, that it's going to be a waste of time.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of meetings are a waste of time. A lot of meetings are a waste of time. I've got a really good friend. I actually keep his book here on the table, so I can just pull it up. Oscar Trimboli from Australia wrote this book, Deep Listening. Deep Listening. And one of the points he makes, and it wasn't just about meetings, but although it is about meetings, it's often about conversations. But most of us, there's already a meeting going on here in the head before we enter the next meeting we're going in. We're thinking about what happened in the last meeting, or you may be thinking about the text message or the email that you had where a project isn't going well, or you're behind on a deadline, or there's something else. You've got friends or relatives coming in, or you've got to arrange for dinner, all of these other things that are in your mind. Oscar gives this simple tip. What if you paused for as little as 5, maybe 10, if you have longer, 30 seconds, and just breathe. Just a couple of very deep breaths, intentional breaths. What this does, and that's why I use this arrival picture here. Most people, they are in the process of still arriving to your meeting once your meeting has begun. So they're not fully with you. And if you start a meeting like this, you use some kind of poll, or you ask people. Polls are great. Polls are great. And I'm going to address Mike's question about webinars in just a moment. Polls are great, but I think what Kinsey noted Kristen said was so true, Rhonda noted, is when you start with gratitude, it shifts the energy. It shifts the energy to a positive frame, and it allows people to transition in a positive frame of mind. Now,
Kevin,
Mike,
can I ask, I hope I'm not interrupting your train of thought, but in what we're dealing with right now with COVID, do you find that that is even more true than ever? The need to kind of partition all the negative and try to emphasize the positive.
Well, okay, I'm going to answer that in two ways, Mike. Let me illustrate this with, and this is how I answer most questions, with a story or an example. I have a dear friend that lives in the UK. Her name is Miranda. Her husband, since COVID-19, he's begun to work at home. He works in the technology world. Miranda and I work in these worlds. We have the opportunity to work with amazing companies who are focused on culture and want to have a great culture. And so we're very accustomed to starting meetings in positive ways and, with care and connection to people. But she walked through the part of the house where her husband was as one of his team meetings was starting. And the boss of that group said, got everybody on the call, a Zoom call like this. And these were his opening words. Is everybody okay? Now, when I see Rhonda smiling, Rhonda, what's the answer he's looking for when he asks, is everybody okay?
Yes. And
there's only one answer he's looking for to that question. So Mike, in times like we're in now, I might start with a gratitude moment. And Kristen can attest to this. Maybe Mike, you can. There are other times I start with something before the gratitude moment. Hey, how would you summarize your life since we were last together? What word or phrase would best summarize your life? So in that moment, we may tap into some of the realities that are going on in our people's lives, because we have to realize people aren't just working at home. People are working at home because of a crisis. And that crisis, I often talk about it like this. There are things that all of us share going on in the macro world, and each and every one of us has something going on in our micro world as well that is affecting how we show up to meetings. So being able to make space for that. But here's the point that this guy, I don't even know his name, don't want to know his name, but what he misses is that he doesn't connect with his people. He doesn't give people an opportunity to connect because he just wants one answer. Yes, let's move on. Is everybody okay? Yes, let's move on. So here's something I want to say, and it's one of the reasons we're having this conversation. Virtual meetings are here to stay. I asked Mike yesterday when we were chatting, I've heard of Coca-Cola. That's something everyone on this call knows. Coca-Cola has no plans of reoccupying their office until 2021 at the earliest. I've heard the same has been said of Cox Communications, not returning to the office until 2021. So what does that mean? It means virtual meetings are here to stay, which that leads me to want to launch another poll. How would you assess? You just told us how many meetings you attend or how many hours you're in meetings. How would you assess the meetings you've attended this week in terms of their quality? Were they engaging and exciting? A, B, mediocre, C, boring, D, a mix of those three answers, because you've been in more than one meeting. So what are these experiences you're having in meetings? Because here's what I've realized. When things happened in March, all of a sudden, people were transitioning meetings they already had planned or meetings they hold. And I want to zero in on that word in a few minutes, hold meetings. Well, I'll zero in on it now. What else do people hold? They hold hostages. So I would invite you to host meetings, not hold meetings. But all of a sudden, people started taking meetings that they were holding in person, and we just have to start doing these online. Now, I have the premise. I just happen to have this belief, and I hope you will pardon using a word that would offend my mother if my mother were alive. Anytime I ever said this word, which I didn't say often, but if I said something sucked, my mother would give me that look. Okay, so I just want to say, most meetings suck. Now, why do I say suck? I don't say it to be offensive. I say it because most meetings suck the life out of the people participating in the meetings. Most meetings suck the creativity, energy, enthusiasm out of the room because they're so bad. That's why I say meetings suck, because that's the effect they have. They suck the brains, the creativity, the opportunity to engage your people in meaningful conversation. You just suck that out of the room. So let's end this poll, share the results. There was a tie between mediocre and engaging and exciting. 42% of you said your meetings are engaging and exciting, 42% mediocre, 8% said boring, and 17% said a mix of all. So back to the Mentimeter here. Let me ask one more question. And I hope you don't mind the interaction that I'm asking, because I want to keep you involved in the conversation. So when you think of, and you can just put your finger or cursor on here and slide across. This is a 1 to 10 scale. Left is very poor. Right is very good. The overall quality of the meetings you attend, and then the level of interaction. So Mike mentioned something a moment ago, and Mike and I had this conversation a couple of times. Mike said, hey, we host webinars, and would you join us for a webinar? And I said, Mike, I'll join you for a webinar because we've become friends out of relationship. Now, I told Mike this, I no longer host webinars of my own. I'll host webinars for clients. I'll host webinars for friends. I will not host a webinar. Why? I use Zoom every single day, and I guess maybe it was 2-3 years ago, I've done webinars. I've done webinars since 2005. That's when I started business. We started doing webinars from day one. We're early adopters of webinars. I stopped doing webinars because I want to be in the room with people. So I don't do webinars. I hold those same kind of meetings, but use the Zoom meeting function. Now, there are challenges that create with that, because then all of a sudden you have more people on the screen. You have to mute, because often in virtual environments now, work at home environments, there's often noise in the background, all of that. Those are the things that we eliminate when you host a webinar. But why I don't host webinars is, to me, and again, this is personal opinion, webinars are more of a push of information. It is we, the host, whoever the hosts are, we have the information, and this is how most webinars are, is, you get to sit and just listen. I want people to interact. I want people to respond. I want to be in conversation, and I want to get you in conversation. Mike can attest to this. Kristen can attest to this. It was about a year ago now that we started using the breakout room functionality of Zoom. When we started having more than 30 people show up, it wasn't possible for all 30 to speak up, but we wanted everybody to participate, at least in the big room. So we started using breakout groups, and we take groups of 3, 4, 5 people. Sometimes they're larger. Sometimes there's a get acquainted round with 7 to 10 people. Then if we're doing a deep dive discussion, we'll use a breakout room. I've done this, and this is where I'll use Mentimeter. If I were hosting a meeting in my company that had a lot of people, I would put people into breakout rooms. Then I would use a screen like this, and I would ask people. So we're brainstorming a topic for 15 minutes. There's an issue that's important facing our business. We're brainstorming it. We've gone into our breakout rooms for 15 minutes for everybody to brainstorm. Then I would ask, and I would put on Menti, have one person from each group share the best ideas from your group. Then all of a sudden on Menti on a screen, we have the best ideas from 5 groups, 10 groups, 15 groups that were in their breakout. Now we are synthesizing the best ideas of the people from our team. You can do that real time in a function like Zoom. So those are the things there. Let's look at the results here. Overall quality of the meetings. This is really good. 6.6 is the average, but look at this. The overall level of interaction is 2 points lower. So we have a lot of meetings where we have people in what I would call the sit and get mode. They're just there to sit, listen, process information. Virtual meetings are here to stay. I've already said that once, but here's how some people are responding when they hear that. They're like, oh my gosh, could you not just give me a gift certificate for a colonoscopy or a root canal? I mean, that would be so much better than telling me that our virtual meetings are here to stay and I've got to show up and endure these week after week. I started on this. I didn't finish this thought a moment ago, Mike and Rhonda and you joining us, that a lot of companies, they just took what were bad meetings that were in person and started conducting those meetings online without any transition, without any accommodating. What's different about the online medium? How do we get people involved? How do we get people engaged? No, they just took meetings that were pretty much bad meetings and put them in an online environment. And what happens when you do that? Well, if your meetings suck, the suck multiplies about 10x or 20x, right? It's just worse. If the meeting was bad in person and now you're online, it's just multiplied. So what can we do about that? So here's a question. And you can respond to this if you want. This is a prompt question. Mike already answered this. It's what's on your mind when you enter a meeting. Mike, why are we meeting? Why do we meet? You know, one of the things that I have had friends tell me that their company started hosting online meetings to see if their people were really working.
That's sad.
Yeah. Now, when I first entered the sales business, sales career 30-something years ago, 31 years ago, I went to a company that had this kind of, we had a sales meeting every morning at 8 o'clock. And our VP of sales, Ray, told us why we had a sales meeting at 8 o'clock. He wanted to make sure we were all at work at 8 o'clock, ready to go, to get started, right? That was why he had those meetings. So that's really that kind of, hey, we just want to check in on you. Well, what does that tell me? We don't trust you? So why we're small, do not have online meetings, in person only. Okay. Even then, why do you meet? Why the meetings you have that are in person, why are you meeting? That's a question to ask. And if the question, so one of the reasons I ask this is if the purpose of your meeting is just to communicate information, you need to be mindful of this principle. People don't care how much you know until they first know how much you care. So if your meeting is to, hey, we just got to give you the updates that have happened since we've been together. So gather on Zoom or GoToMeeting or WebEx, whatever the platform is you use, and we're just going to go into this brain dump mode. But we don't want to know what's going on in your life. We don't want to hear what are the challenges you're facing since we were together last. You know what? People aren't really that interested in your information because they don't believe you care about them. So that whole idea, the opportunity to care. But then another question, why do you meet the way you meet in your company? Why do you meet? Think about this. Why do we meet the way we meet? And this kind of gets into that webinar question, Mike. You know, we're hosting a webinar, and I asked Mike, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but folks, I'm going to tell you, I went through this same journey. Why was I hosting webinars? Because somebody said webinars are what you want to do to serve your clients. You want to connect with your clients? Host webinars. It's a great way to share information. Okay, I'll host webinars. So all of a sudden you're hosting webinars. Well, what if you started thinking about, why do you meet the way you meet? What is it that we want to accomplish? Now, I'm just going to be very honest here. I don't know. There is no judgment about Mike and Rhonda hosting webinars. But I do know, because Mike's already told me and he pointed it out, he stopped calling this a webinar, started calling it an online session in your promotional material. Right, Mike?
That's exactly right. It's funny, when you're talking about sit and get, that really applies to us. This is our 14th weekly webinar. The very first webinar that we put together fit the traditional definition of a webinar. The people tuned in, if that's the right term,
yep,
and they just listened to us talk. Now, hopefully what we shared was of interest, but it didn't lend itself to any interaction whatsoever. So we've been trying to heed your advice. I've been watching you do what you do for a while now, and we are acknowledging, yes, we're using a webinar platform, but we're trying to figure out a way to make this more engaging. As you already know, the folks who have registered for our session today are mostly leaders. They are not necessarily only attending meetings, they're leading meetings. So they probably wouldn't be using a webinar platform, but they may very well be using a Zoom meeting. Is what you're showing us today, is it equally usable in a Zoom meeting or its counterpart?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and that also prompts me to launch the final poll we're asking you today. Are you responsible to lead online meetings, or are you usually just attending? Which are you? Because we do believe that we have a lot of you here who are responsible for hosting meetings, leading meetings, which is why we're having this conversation today. How might you make your meetings more engaging, more inviting, more stimulating, and that you end up with a better result from the meeting? So yes, everything I'm sharing with you today, I do in Zoom meetings. And the other thing I want to say, I hope you get this. I'm not pushing any type of technology. I'm using tools I'm very comfortable with. Mentimeter is a great tool. I get no commission if you buy Mentimeter. They'll probably never know I was the one that, where you saw it. But what I really want to illustrate and demonstrate is a philosophical approach to conducting meetings that you can make your own. How do you do this to engage people? How do you invite people into conversation? So 81% of you with us right now lead meetings. So one thing I want to invite you to do is to stop holding meetings and start hosting meetings. There's so many things that are very subtle mind shifts, but when we make them, they are significant in that. So stop holding meetings, start hosting meetings. Here is the slide. This comes from Fuse Meetings. I just pulled a snapshot out of an infographic they have, but most meetings are unproductive. In fact, executives consider more than 67% of their meetings to be failures. Go back and look at how much time you spend in meetings and think, wow. And this number has escalated dramatically. The amount of time people spend in meetings in today's workplace, it is ridiculous. All right, so I want to kind of draw this to a close. Let me just share something. And I told Mike, these are thoughts. This is the first time I'm ever sharing what you're about to see here. This diagram just hit me the other morning. But most of us, we think our meetings, we think there is a binary choice. Do we want this meeting to be passive, or do we want it to be active? And we look at those as two opposite ends of the spectrum. A passive meeting is sit and get. If you are participating, how you get to participate is by taking notes. In an active meeting, you get to give input. but often your input is limited to asking or answering questions. So where is the focal point of a meeting? In a passive meeting, and I've heard this said for years, the mind can absorb what the bottom can endure, right? You're sitting there. If all you're doing is sitting, you begin to get antsy and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, I want to get up. I want to move around. I want to do something else. Where is the focus of activity when in an active meeting? It's your head. It's your head. Well, let me get this to advance. There we go. What if you began to apply design thinking and user experience? That's what UX is if you're not familiar with that. What if you started thinking about what is the meeting experience? What is the experience of our team in our meetings? Where do meetings fit in the overall employee journey or the employee experience? And if you start taking a user experience and applying design thinking to your meetings, I believe you would do your meetings differently. So this is kind of the basic principles of design thinking there.
Kevin,
So
what does the term design thinking mean? Make sure we're all.
Oh, wow.
What do you mean by that?
This comes out of, I'm trying to think of the name of the company in California that does so much work around design, and with Stanford, that Stanford University has a center for design. The name's about almost there. Come in a moment, maybe.
Sorry,
IDEO.
I can't help. IDEO. Good. Thank you.
IDEO. Those are the folks that came up with design thinking. It's this whole approach to how do we think differently? How do we understand what's going on in our people? You see user experience, employee experience, customer experience, all of those terms are probably terms you've heard. Those are all taking the process of design thinking and applying them to different fields of life. So it's kind of like, or work. It's kind of like, what is the customer seeing? What are they feeling? What are they thinking? How do we take that and how do we create a better experience? How do we design differently? And so much of this started out of the computer world, thinking about the interface of programs, and the mouse that I hold in my hand, that is a part of design thinking. What is it that makes it a more easy experience for our users? So design thinking is just taking all of these elements that we know, social elements, the psychological elements, what people are thinking, feeling, and apply it to our meetings. So back to this, here's where I want to take you. Take this and go, okay, what if all of a sudden we realize that having meeting engagement is not a binary problem. It's not either or. It's not either passive or aggressive, but there's this bigger continuum at stake. And on the far end is passive meetings. In the middle are active meetings. But Mike, what you've experienced and what we say almost every week when I host the Hangouts that I host on Friday is what we do is we co-create this experience together every time we gather. What does co-create mean? Well, co-create means that there's generative thinking going on from all of the participants, that they are invited in as a equal, as a peer to the party planning. They're not just there to sit, listen. They're not just there to answer our questions or ask a question. They are there to help us generate the best thinking we have possible in our organization about this challenge we're facing. Here's an example of a generative thinking idea. We live in the South, so a lot of people here are familiar with churches, right? And we can talk about what's happened with church. Well, if we just talk about pure membership of organizations, and if Amazon Prime were a church, Amazon Prime would be the largest church in the world. There are more members of Amazon Prime than most anything else that people are members of. And do you know where the idea for Amazon Prime came from?
No, where did it come from?
an engineer.
Hmm.
It wasn't the sales team. It wasn't the marketing team. They had suggestion box. And one day there was this engineer that had just kind of been thinking about this and realized what a headache shipping was for people. And he said, what if we created a service? He didn't have the name Amazon Prime, but what if we created a service where people could prepay a membership and get all of their shipping for free? And there came Amazon Prime. That's a generative idea. It's not limited to the experts who have the expertise to address how do we, address this problem in our organization. We get our best thinking from anybody in the company. It's explorative. How do we invite people into conversations? How do we allow people to identify problems for us that we've not even yet identified as a problem? That's what happens in a co-creative environment. Wow, Mike, let's just kind of, what questions do you have? Now, there was one question I remember that was asked in advance, and this is one of my favorite questions. It's a question I started asking a couple of years ago. Where do you look when you're on an online meeting? Where do you look? Where do you focus your attention? I don't remember who asked the question, but it was one of the questions when you registered, someone asked, where do you look? And if you notice, a lot of people, they're not sure where to look. And you see them looking down because what they've done is their computer screen or their laptop is lowered on a desk. So they are looking down where they see the screen. And they may or may not even know where the camera is on their computer. So first thing I would suggest, find out where the camera is on your device. Or if you're like me, and I think Mike uses an external camera, I have a camera that sits above my laptop because I want to look at you and give you the impression that I'm maintaining eye contact. So there are times I'm looking down to see my screen, but I know where the center of my camera is. I actually have a little trick here. I actually have a sticky that's right there under the center point of my camera, so I can remember, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be looking.
You make a point, because with my screen right now has got a lot of stuff on it, and it can be easy to lose track. Where in the world is the camera itself? Kevin, I want to make sure that we do field some questions. You know, we call this a Q&A session, and we're now starting to get some questions. You may see one of them.
Yeah.
One of them from Reed is asking, agendas. What role do you think agendas should play in a meeting? And if you are using an agenda, should it be provided in advance?
Wow, those are great questions, Reed. I am a fan of agendas, but I'm a fan of a different type of agenda. What if your agenda asks or lists the questions we want to get your input on? What could we do? How could we generate X% of improvement or cost savings? One of the things I love right now, so many companies that have really found ways to save money during COVID-19, they found those money-saving ideas from inviting their employees, their partners in the company, to identify ways to cut cost out of the company. And folks that are closest to the issues have some of the best ideas. So I'm about to go to a meeting at the top of the hour with my friend Jane Adshead Grant. And this is one of the things we're going to be talking about, because Jane talks about this thinking environment. And one of the things I've learned from Jane is to, as much as possible, Reed, convert the topics on an agenda to a question. And I'd have to look this up. I've just heard it so many years. I do remember reading the original research. I'm not a neuroscientist. I appreciate neuroscience. Questions engage the brain in a different way, especially open-ended questions, than a statement does. If you want to engage people in a conversation, ask a question. It engages the brain. The brain can't let go until it answers the question. You make a statement, I may or may not agree with you. It may not generate any energy or excitement. You ask a question, you've got me on board. So ask questions in your agenda. And Provide the agenda in advance to allow people to come prepared, come with their best thinking. Don't cram too many things on the agenda. You know, I do a lot of work, have through the years done a lot of work with nonprofit boards. And what's really sad is that so many agendas have all of the perfunctory items, and they're just squeezed in there, that there's not really time for the important stuff that you really want to engage people in conversation on.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Kevin, you're not poo-pooing, if I can use that term, agendas, but what you are encouraging us as leaders, if you're going to host a meeting, your recommendation is be very intentional as you're thinking about what you want to accomplish in the meeting, and you use that term user experience. Mm-hmm. And that is, look at leading the meeting, hosting the meeting, and look at it from their perspective. How can we bring them into this process? How can we engage participants? How can we make sure they feel that they're part of? Yeah. And you are saying that there is value, is if you are going to provide the agenda, be a little more realistic of what you can try to accomplish in a meeting, and to leave room in it such that people don't feel like you're just checking boxes as you go through it. And then you make an interesting point, and this is something we will add to what we do when our workshops for clients on how to lead effective meetings. We're going to be adding that notion of, rather than just list agenda items, repurpose it, rethink it more as a question to get their creative juices flowing, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Okay, that's very well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kevin, I actually have a question about using video in Zoom. So we early on in our webinars had kind of polled and asked people that were participating if this format works, if we should have everybody on video, if we should open mics, and people that were joining our webinars or sessions seem to like just having the chat box open, because with so many people it can be distracting to have microphones open. But I've been on different Zoom meetings that are obviously just audio and you're listening and the chat box is open. And then I've been on some where there's 20 to 30 people and everybody's on video, which is great to interact with people. But sometimes to me, it can be distracting too, because I'm paying more attention to who's on, what, what's in their background, what does their house look like? So do you have an idea or perspective on what type of meetings should you have everybody on video, and what type of meetings should you not?
So why are you meeting? What is it that you want to accomplish in this meeting, Rhonda? If we're wanting people to engage, so I'll ask this, and gosh, Mike, maybe we're going to let people in on a dirty little secret here. I don't know if you've ever looked at this report, Mike or Rhonda, but Zoom can actually tell you, as can GoToMeeting, as can WebEx or any other tool, they can tell you what % of time you had your users' attention in a webinar.
But it surprised you to learn we actually do look at that report, and that has instructed us on how to hopefully improve upon what we're doing.
Because the majority of people multitask during meetings. So Rhonda, I discovered this 5 years ago in a group I was part of. We were meeting every week, and we were meeting by teleconference, no video. And I will tell you, I'm one of those people that has bought into the myths of multitasking, and I used to think that I could multitask. I now realize I don't multitask. I divert my attention between a lot of different tasks multiple times, and there is a loss of concentration there, and trying to come back, is tough and difficult. So most people, if they are just in an audio-only teleconference, are probably doing something else. And when you invite video in and allow people to turn video on, most people, their attention goes way up. So it's kind of like, what's the point of the meeting? If the point of the meeting is to engage people and it's a team meeting, we want to have a discussion, I'd have video on. Now, I would also teach people how to clean up, clean up environment backgrounds, not to have it cluttered. We've all seen some really funny stories of somebody walking through in the background that wasn't appropriately dressed or doing something else, or the person that didn't know that on their phone when they were using, you only see a small screen on your Zoom phone, and a lady went to the bathroom, had no idea her camera was activated, and that everybody on the Zoom call is watching her go to the bathroom, and the host had no idea what's going on, and people are losing it. And the host, what's happened? Because she just sees everybody cracking up. So there are all of these things that just get really weird, but it's teaching people some etiquette and having conversations about what's the etiquette that we want to have. What is it that's going to allow us, I want to use that word, what is it that's going to allow us to have the most productive meetings our team needs to be having? And then
Kevin,
we
I might
develop
interrupt.
that etiquette together.
And etiquette means I don't interrupt. I apologize for
That's okay.
Interrupting. We've acknowledged the constraints of a webinar platform. And the topic we're discussing is meetings. And the folks who are participating in this are leaders and hosting these meetings. You have shared with us that there are things that we can do to make things more engaging. We've actually have tried to apply that. Rhonda mentioned when we started off, it was really one way. Then we began opening it up. But you'll notice for those who registered this go around, when you were asked for your name and email, you were also asked on the front end, do you have questions or topics you want to make sure that we cover? Well, if you don't know, that's what pretty much drove the questions that we asked Kevin to cover in this webinar. So that's a good use of it. We're trying, by the way, for the first time, a co-host. We've never done that before, and Kevin as a co-host, he's a pro, but he's doing real well. And you'll notice we've added polling, something that we've not done in the past. You add Mentometer to it, you can see we're hopefully are demonstrating things that you can do as leaders to make your meetings more productive. And the point I'm hearing you say, Kevin, is that if you're going to host a meeting, it's better to have video. It tends to lessen the distractibility. People tend to stay a little more focused.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Mike, I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today. I love the comments. This was really great. I was engaged and definitely got pointers to use in the future. Thank you. Connect with attendees. Yes, that's the big takeaway. Connect with attendees. Don't dump information, but seek to make the meeting engaging. I've got one more thing I will say, and then I've got to leave because, I have a meeting I host at the top of the hour. Hey, if you want to put more zip in your Zoom, contact me. I would love to help you. I really enjoy, especially working with a team of leaders, hosting conversations like this with that team of leaders that's also modeling how that team of leaders now does that with their people. So Mike, Rhonda, thank you for allowing me to be here today. Thank all of you for joining us. And even if you're just watching after the fact, you're watching the video, thanks. And I hope you find something that helps you put more zip in your Zoom and make virtual meetings engaging and enjoyable for your people and more beneficial for your organization.
Without a doubt, Kevin, you've been a great host and have added a lot of things to our toolbox that would help put zip in the Zoom. It looks like I am now, do I have the screen now? If you hand that back to me. Now the question is, what in the world am I going to do here? And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to close this out. I think I've lost the ability to show my slides. And so what I'm going to do is, rather than fumble with that, let me point out a couple of things to you. I want to kind of close this. I want to stop sharing so I hope it's not a distraction. Kevin, I know you've got to run.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Rhonda and I will wrap up this. You have a great and blessed day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, everyone that was with us.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
As I fumble to find the slide deck, let me just give you all a little bit of a heads up of kind of what's going to happen. Next week, July 4th week, it's going to be kind of an awkward week time-wise, and so we've opted to skip next Thursday's webinar. So if you would, go ahead and mark your calendars Thursday, July 9th. July 9th, where we're going to be inviting as an expert panelist, someone who's actually on our call right now, but Kristen Mashburn is going to be joining us. Kristen and I got to know each other through the Friday Hangout that Kevin hosts, but we've invited her to join us to speak on how can you as leaders, how can we as leaders get more out of our teams by creating a more nurturing culture. And I think what we're hearing from Kevin, he's a strong advocate for nurturance and building culture. I also just want to remind the folks that if you, in our time together, have questions you would like to ask of Rhonda, or if you'd like to ask of me, then what I invite you to do is on the email follow-up, it will contain a link, and that link will give you an opportunity to get on our calendars. And we'd just love an opportunity to have that conversation. It's a free consultation, but just to be available to help in any way we possibly can. Rhonda, we are about out of time. What else? I'm going to include the contact information for Kevin in the email follow-up. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap up?
Just real quickly, Mike, I think most of you know that have been on our webinars before. Mike and I both have an HR background, so we always gravitate to HR related topics and try to include something in our webinars or sessions for that. And again, would just encourage people, as we've talked about in previous webinars, with a lot of the changes going on between COVID and now racial protesting and a lot of unrest and anxiety, just to make sure you have all the things in place within your companies to address and effectively handle issues like that that may come up, whether it's policies, handbooks, employee communications, training for your managers. There's a lot of things you can proactively do to try to alleviate any issues within the company as people are really dealing with a lot of unrest. And Mike and I are more than happy, you know, as he said, if you want to contact us to kind of guide you through what some proactive actions are that you can take, or to look at what you have and make some recommendations if there's things that you can improve on to just set the right work environment for your people right now. So let us know if there's anything we can do to help you take a look at what you have going on with your employees right now.
Thank you, Rhonda, and thanks to everybody who gave us your time this morning. I hope you found it productive. We look forward to having you back with us on July 9th. Until then, let me invite you, be safe, go out there, do what you do and do well, stay informed, and we hope to have you back with us on the 9th. Godspeed. Take care, everybody.